welcome to week 5 of the Bloomerang Start to Finish project. I'm Misty Doan, and I'm joined here by Liz Gubernatis.
Hi, usually the voice behind the camera.
That's right. But we are so excited. This is the final week of our Start to Finish project for National Quilt Month. This has been so much fun. I hope you have enjoyed sewing along with us. And what we're going to tackle today is trimming our quilted project and adding this great flanged binding.
Yep.
So
we're going to put the finish in start to finish.
That's exactly right. We're going to really finish this up. So should we start with the trimming and dive into that?
Yes. So the first thing we want to do is trim. And you can trim to a specific measurement, but what we're actually going to do for ourselves, because everybody's quarter inch is just a hair different, we're going to use the seams to guide us and actually make nice clean edges.
Perfect.
So I'll step out of your way.
All right. And so we've got this nice big ruler because I find that is easier to work with when I am trimming. And I am just watching those seams and making sure that we are lined up on the same mark all the way down. So I've got this one where I want it, and now I'm just going to shift a little bit down here and make sure I'm still looking at the same spot.
It's one thing I love about our great big ruler is you can see right through it.
Exactly.
And those marks highlight where you're trying to line up.
And so you can see I get a little bit off in the middle here, and that happens sometimes with quilting, but I'm really going to focus on my two ends and make sure that we end up square. And so based on our stitching, I am just a hair over the 1.5 inch mark. So I'm at 1 5/8 is what I'm looking at.
Okay.
And so we're just going to make a nice long cut and move my hand and cut that all the way off and move that out of the way.
Awesome.
And now we can turn. And I am very linear, so even though I'm not really using my cutting mat to make these cuts, I like to just make sure that my project is straight once I've made that first cut.
Sure.
So I do have this lined up straight across my mat just as a reference for myself. And then again, we should be at that same 1 5/8 measurement. So let's just make sure, looking at our seam, this one looks really nice all the way down.
And Misty, like you said, sometimes there's a little variation because of how
Yeah.
tightly we may have quilted this, where it pulls in just a little bit, but it's not going to be noticeable to your eye once we've
Exactly, and
down the
I
quilt.
like to also make sure that I have my square right in the corner, just
Good
because
tip. Okay.
I want to make sure that my corners end up right at 90 degrees,
Yep.
so we don't have any issues there.
Stay square.
Yep, so I've got that good to go here. Gonna double check one more time. This is one of those things where you really want to triple check before you cut. Just take your time, adjust your hands if you need to, and make your cuts.
And as you're adjusting your hand, I'm just noticing you're keeping the rotary cutter right there,
Yes,
so it's not moving.
exactly. All right.
So now you've got two sides you can line up.
Exactly. So this looks beautiful and square. Let me just grab this here again. And this is all lining up so nicely.
And it's really great to have this big ruler, but if you don't, there's a tip earlier in this series where Misty also can shift the ruler while holding.
Right, and I can, here, let me slide this down and I'll just show you
Yep.
as if
you had the smaller.
I had a smaller one. So then let's just make sure this is where we want it, and I'll find a reference up here. So instead of looking all the way to the top, let's pretend this is shorter. So I've got my 1 5/8 down here, and then I'm looking up towards the top because we do want to make sure that there's no wiggle in our ruler. So we've got the 1 5/8 up here where these seams are meeting as well. And I'm just going to start my cut. I'm going to keep my rotary cutter exactly where it is. And then I'm going to slide my ruler up and make sure that we're still hitting that mark. And so you can see I need to shift it just a little now that I'm up here. But my rotary cutter stays right in place against the ruler. And then we can finish that cut.
Perfect.
And then one more.
It's looking so good.
It looks so great. I love it. And again, I just like to make sure everything is as square as possible. because that is how we want this to finish up. So we've got that side looking good. And one more. There we go. It is
Ooh.
all trimmed.
All
Thanks,
right.
Liz. All right, so there is our quilted and trimmed project. It looks wonderful. So let's talk about adding this flanged binding. All right, and so for this flange binding, Liz, you want to talk a little bit about how we put these together?
Yes, I love a flange binding for two reasons. One, you actually put it on by machine.
Right.
I'm not as much a lover of putting on that binding by hand. I know you do.
I do love
it.
to hand bind, but I also love a flange binding, so
And
I think it's a great compromise.
I love the look of the flange binding. You get that kind of two-tone color. So the way we do that is there's actually two fabrics. And what is sneaky for your brain is actually the little bit of fabric you see, that yellow
Yeah,
in
let's
this
pull
case.
it over here.
That's actually going to be the wider of the two strips we're cutting to make this binding.
And so you cut that to 1 3/4 inches,
So
right?
that's going to be 1 3/4 inches. And then we have the smaller, which is going to be actually the outside of the flange binding, is 1 1/4 inches.
Okay.
And so
that's good. That's important to point out to people because it is tricky on our brain, right? We
Yes.
think that the larger piece is going to be the outside, but in the end, it is this smaller piece that you see more of on the
Yes,
flange binding.
it is. And the other thing that I want to say is too, we're just going to show you a little piece of how to put this together, but you'll want to cut the strips for your flange binding and sew all your blue strips together and all your yellow strips together before you sew the two lengths of them together.
And you need what, about 3 strips by the width of fabric?
About 3. 2 is almost enough, but
Yeah.
not quite. So we said go for 3 to get all the way around and have a little bit of extra binding.
Perfect.
And the other thing is too, when you're putting these together, your 2 long strips, you would offset them a little bit so that their joins don't come right together and create extra bulk.
Lots of bulk. That's really smart.
So when you're putting your 2 big long strips together, you're going to offset them maybe 1 inch.
Okay.
Not much, but just enough to offset that extra bulk.
That's really clever. You know, I've done this and I don't do that. I've never done that before, and that's very smart. I love that. All right, so we have these. We've got our 1/4 inch foot ready to go again. And we can just zoom down the side.
And the other thing I want to say too is, if bindings is something that you're interested in doing some more with, we also have a class with Natalie. And she's got a class called Creating Better Bindings.
It's
and
such a good class.
It's got so much good info about doing all kinds of bindings. We love this flange binding. She's also done another Final Stitch episode all about the flange binding and attaching it by machine. So you can get a little more detail in there as well.
All right, this is ready to go. So now we can just press that back, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm going to press that back first, and then we're going to press it in half, and that's
Just
where the
like normal
flange comes.
binding, right?
Yep. Okay. So when I flip this over, I'm going to pull this in, and just like normal, we're just going to fold this in half.
Okay.
And what that's going to do is create the flange.
I love that.
So it's actually just like one extra layer of stitches, if you think about it,
Yeah.
to making a flange binding when you stitch the 2 sections together.
It's such a fun little detail to add
It
to a
is.
project.
I love anytime you can add a little extra pop of color too.
Yeah,
But I know we both love color and adding extra color, so
exactly.
all right.
So you
So that's what it looks like. And we've got a whole section
Ready to go.
ready to go around the whole quilt. So we'll get started on actually attaching it.
Right.
It's also instead of to the front.
Right, because we're going to finish this on machine. We are going to attach this on the back of the project first. So let's actually flip this over, and we want to make sure that when we wrap it around, our flange is going to show. So that side is going to go down towards our project. We're going to sew a 1/4 inch and go all the way around, mitering our corners, and we will meet you back here when that's done to talk about finishing the top.
And I do just want to say, as we get started, we're going to leave plenty of tail to join.
Yes, exactly.
So where about do you think you'll start this?
So I actually will probably slide this down, and I leave a good amount in the center.
Okay.
I'm glad you asked that, Liz. That's a really great question. And so I'll leave probably 8-10 inches
Okay.
open in the middle, just so I have plenty of room to work. But I don't want to leave my opening too close to those corners,
Right.
because I want to make sure that my corners lay down really nice and we're
and
finishing
easy.
off on a straight side.
Yeah, so can you actually start us and show us how you go around one corner?
Sure, absolutely.
And then you'll do the other 3 corners the same way.
Absolutely. All right, so I'm just going to hold this right here, and I'm going to leave these tails up here. So this, I'm actually not going to start sewing at the end. I'm just going to start down here. Oops, my needle is still down. Let me raise that. And get all squared away. And so I like to backstitch when I start my binding, just because I don't want that to come out. And I stop about a 1/4 inch from the bottom edge, and I just kind of eyeball it. I can see where this side is approaching the needle, and I'm going to stop and pivot and come off right where the point of the project would be. So I'm creating kind of a 45 right there, and then I can turn this like so, and I can create this perfect miter by pulling that back and lining this up like this. And then we just sew 1/4 inch this way.
And I love that trick, Misty, because that sewing off the corner does give you that perfect fold.
It really
Sometimes
does.
it can be tricky to get that if you have just stopped in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing to show is like you started right off the edge and you didn't have to find that corner
Yeah,
to match.
yeah, exactly. And you can see when we pull this back, it's just going to miter
That's gonna look
beautifully.
gorgeous.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a really great finish. So like I said, we're going to continue this all the way around, and I guess we can meet you back
Yep,
at the
we'll show
end,
you
and
how to join it.
we'll show you how to join it. Okay, so we have our binding sewn all the way around the edge, and let me show you how you finish this off. So I actually like to use scissors, so let me grab those. Here we are.
Okay.
And I just cut off my bottom piece first, just straight across, and then I lay this like so across the end of my binding. And we're using this as a reference because the width of this is the amount we need our binding strips to overlap. So then we can just take this top piece and we can set it just on top. And I actually cut mine just a hair short. And I have found that that works for some reason. With the angle, you need just a little bit less, but this
Yeah.
is the reference you want to use.
That makes sense. And I think part of it is you think you might want to give yourself a little bit more for room, but then you'll end up with a pleat or a buckle
Exactly,
or a
and it
bubble.
kind of tucks.
So
So
actually just a little
I just
inside.
go inside just a smidge, about 1/8 of an inch on the other side of where those meet. And you can see it's not much at all.
Okay,
And I like that the flange allows you to see the difference in that cut.
that's true.
And so now we can open this up, and we're going to attach these just like we would our normal binding strips. Even though we have these flanges, we're going to lay them on top of each other.
And it's okay to manhandle
It
the
is,
quilt.
absolutely. And so we have this one facing up, this one facing down. So the one on my right hand is facing up, the one on my left is facing down. I'm going to put them exactly together, matching these top corners. And the trick that you want to remember is you're kind of making the letter A. I know it's all a jumbled mess right now, but you've got your two pieces forming a peak, and then we're going to stitch that line right across.
Okay, that makes
Yeah.
the letter A.
That makes the letter A.
That's a great memory tool.
It is. It has helped me over the years for sure. And so I actually like to put a pin in mine.
Okay.
And so I'm going to put a pin in the top here just to make sure that it stays where I want it. And I'm going to come down here and put a pin in the bottom.
And are you too worried about how the flange is going to meet up?
I am not.
Because it kind of just magically
It
works.
just magically works. And so we're going to sew this corner to corner.
Okay.
And you just kind of have to maneuver your quilt to get these pieces to lay flat. This can be some of the trickiest stitching that you do, but it really does all work out. And so I'm just going to put that point right in line with my needle. So I'm going to start taking a few stitches now that I have that in place, and then I can just make sure that my opposite end is lined up using my diagonal seam tape. I know that's going to go straight towards the needle, and then I can just stitch across. There we go.
And then you check this before you trim it, right?
Absolutely. So I take my pins out.
I've done this where I trimmed first.
And you don't want to do that. And so then we just pull it back, and we can see
how great.
that lines up. And look at that. We didn't worry about that at all.
And it just lined right up.
And it matches up perfectly.
And I will show you too, if it doesn't line up very perfectly, you're still going to be stitching that down. You're going to catch it. It's not actually a big deal.
It's very forgiving. So let's go ahead and trim off this bulk now that we have that done. And we can just trim. Make sure you don't cut through your threads, obviously. And then we can just finish top stitching this down. And then we'll meet you and show you how we finish it up on top.
And one more thing too. Oh. You can see there's just a little bit of tension here. This is great.
Yes.
You want that. That's how you know you're not going to get the bubble.
That's
that's why she cut that just a little bit short.
Just a little hair short, because then it makes it just a little bit smaller, but there is enough give in the fabric that once I stitch it, it's going to lay beautifully.
Be perfect.
Yep.
So we'll see you back here in a minute.
Okay, so we have this all finished. We've gone ahead and given this a press so it is laying smooth and we don't have any pleats on the back side. And now we're going to turn this over, and you can see how beautifully this is going to fold and finish off this project. And so I do want to point out, we actually kept the pink thread that we used in the quilting, and we decided that it just works with it. We're going to stitch on this yellow here, and you can see, it blends beautifully on the yellow flower of the project, and so we're just going to stick with that. And I think one of the added benefits by keeping that pink thread is when we stitch on the back, it's going to blend in with our quilting, and we'll just disappear just like the quilting does on the back. And so I think it's the right choice. I'm really happy with that. So now we're just going to pull this around, and this is a great place to use Wonder clips, binding clips, if you have those.
Yes. So and they come in lots of sizes and colors, but basically, they hold this without using pins. They've got this kind of curved edge which is on top, and they have a good spring to them. They're easy to use, but they also hold lots of layers.
And they make your life so much easier. And so let's talk a little bit about these corners, because remember I showed you when we were sewing the binding on how beautifully they miter. It works the exact same in the front. So you can see we are folding this part down. It creates this 45 angle down here. Can you guys see that? Okay, let me turn it around. Creates this 45 angle right here, and then we can just fold this back, and it is going to match up beautifully.
Look how the yellow lines up and the aqua teal lines up.
Exactly. And so then we can just put another binding clip in place there, and when we get to the machine, all of that will just work out lovely. So let's go ahead and put these around, and then we can take this and we're just going to top stitch this on the machine. So we'll just add a few more clips.
And does it matter when you're mitering if the top or the bottom flap is on top?
So that's a great question. For me, I just do the same thing all the way around. And that tends to work for me. I've never noticed that it really matters, but I will say I showed you this opposite of what I traditionally do, and I think I don't know why I showed it that way, but when I'm sitting at the machine, I actually like to fold the bottom first, because my machine then finishes on top. Does that make sense? And so then when my needle is held down, I can pivot, and I don't have to worry about it getting caught on the presser foot.
So let's show that in this corner here then.
Okay, So I actually, you're coming around here, and I kind of stop a little ways away, so I have some room to work.
Okay.
And then I fold up the bottom side
And fold in.
and fold in. It's hard to do when it's not stitched, but I'll show you, I can show you on the machine.
Sure. Okay.
And then you can see
So where your needle stops, it's right there,
it's
ready to
right
go.
there, ready to go.
Smooth. Okay.
And so it does take a little bit of thinking ahead, but I find that it makes the stitching really smooth.
Awesome.
So
Okay.
let's go ahead and do that.
Sure.
And we can start here. And we are just going to stitch right where the yellow and the green meet. So just on the yellow side, we don't want to stitch on the green side.
Kind of a stitch in
Stitch
the ditch.
in the ditch, exactly. All right, let me make sure my thread is where I need it to go. And then I'm gonna go ahead and hand crank my needle and make sure it's where I want it. And then we can just start stitching. And I just pull my wonder clips out of the way as I go. And you can see I'm approaching that corner, so I'm going to go ahead and fold up this bottom side and get my top piece ready to go.
Slick.
And then I can just approach this, and I will stop with my needle down right in that corner, and I can pivot.
Nice.
Yeah, it works great. And then you can see once I turn, I'm not fighting with that at all because I've already tacked it in place.
Yep.
We can just keep going.
And the nice thing is about this part, you've already joined it, so you're just stitching the ditch all the way around.
Exactly. It's as easy as that.
As easy as that. Okay, awesome.
All right.
All right. So that's it.
That is it. It is all finished up. You can see how this flange binding adds a really fun little detail. It's really quick and easy, and it's definitely something you should try if you haven't. I think it's so fun, like Liz said, to add that extra pop of color to your project. So this has been so great. Thank you for joining me, Liz.
Thank you for having me. This has been fun to be on this side and see how this side works.
Exactly. It's been very fun, and I hope you all enjoyed this Bloomerang start to finish project for National Quilt Month. We'll see you soon.
We hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you are not already part of the Missouri Star Quilt family, you can hit the subscribe button below so you won't miss a thing. And if you click that bell, it'll notify you every time a new tutorial comes out. See you next Friday.